Hello, friends. There was a guy by the name Peter. He was working as assistant manager at a particular company in town. There was one of his colleague who was quiet and never talked much with his workmates. One day Peter decided to go and have a chat with her, because he was so attracted to the lady, and he wanted to know her more. One morning Peter went to that lady to say hi. When he reached there he said, "Hi." The lady innocently replied hi too. Peter told her, "My name is Peter, what about you?" The lady replied, "My name is Jane." He shook her hand, smiled at her cute face, and told her, "It was pleasure meeting you." Jane smiled back and said thanks friend, and then she went to her office. Peter was so happy, at least he had managed to talk to Jane for the first time. He went to his office smiling. As Peter was working he kept thinking about Jane and imagined how it would be if she was his girlfriend, because he fell in love at first sight, but he kept asking himself what if Jane has a boyfriend or she was married. During lunch break Peter decided to go to Jane's office and request to take her for a date, so that he can tell her how he felt for her. He decided to go at Jane's office and talk to her. When he reached at Jane's door, his heart was beating fast because he was afraid. He stood there for a moment before knocking and started asking himself, what if she says no to his request? Anyways, friends, he decided to knock and try his luck. Peter knocked the door, and he heard a cute voice saying, "Come in." Peter entered Jane's office and sat in front of her looking at her eyes. He asked Jane if they can go have lunch together at the cafeteria. Jane replied, "I'm quite busy, but I promise tomorrow we will have lunch together." Peter tried to persuade her but she refused. He went back but promised himself he will not give up. He went at the cafeteria, had his lunch, and went back to his office. The following day Peter requested Jane's contacts so that they can communicate later. Jane gladly gave her contacts to him. Peter was so happy and he hugged her tightly. Later after job, Peter texted Jane, and luckily enough she responded well. They talked for several days and their conversation was very interesting. Peter thought it was the right time to tell her how he felt for her. He told her how much he loves her and her would be the happiest man if she gives him a chance to be her boyfriend. Jane told Peter, "You are a handsome guy, well groomed, but I'm dating someone else, so we can just be friends." Peter felt like his heart was shattered. He looked at her and told her, "I wish you well." Although it was hard to accept the bitter truth, Peter became Jane's friend and was always there for her. One day Jane went to visit her boyfriend at his home because she wanted to surprise him. As she reached there she knocked the door, but her boyfriend took a lot of time before he opened the door for her. Jane asked him, "Why did you take a lot of time to open for me? Is there anything you are hiding?" His boyfriend told her all was well. Jane entered his house and hugged him, and started telling him how much she missed him. After a few minutes Jane heard a lady's voice saying, "Babe, who was that?" Jane looked at his boyfriend and asked him who was she. His boyfriend admitted he has found another girlfriend and he was afraid to tell her. Jane was so devastated and started crying. She stood and left without a word and said to herself, she will never come there again after finding out her boyfriend was cheating on her. She was very hurt to a point she almost took her life. Peter was there for her and encouraged her and told her she should forget about her ex-boyfriend. Peter changed her pains to happiness, and they were both happy and enjoyed every moment they spent together. Jane was so happy, and one day Peter asked her to be his girlfriend. She accepted and promised to stick by him no matter what came their way. They were so happy, Peter took care of her very well without complaining. One day Jane's ex-boyfriend called her and apologized and promised her he will never hurt her again. Jane believed her ex-boyfriend and was ready to go back to him. Peter warned her, but Jane insisted that she loved him and she believes he had changed for the better. Peter was so devastated. After Jane broke up with him, months passed and Peter met a beautiful lady who helped him forget his pains. Peter was so happy in his new relationship. After some months he proposed to her new girlfriend and she said yes. He was very happy and promised to love her, because she meant the whole world to him. One day Jane came to work unhappy and she was crying. Peter asked her what was bothering her. Jane said her boyfriend cheated on her again and she no longer wants him again, but instead she wants to get back to him. Peter explained to her that was not possible because he is already engaged, and he and his fiancée are planning their wedding. Jane pleaded with Peter to give her second chance, but Peter refused and told her they can only be friends. Jane felt so bad she had left Peter, who genuinely loved her. Before you make choices, make sure you don't rush to please others, because you may end up regretting the rest of your life.